Don't come back here if you can't even do basic housework. My mother-in-law shouted at me angrily while I was in the hospital with a broken leg. The ironic part was that she was the reason I got hurt, but instead of apologizing, she was trying to kick me out of the house. Reaching my breaking point, I replied with a smile, "Oh, I'd be happy to leave, ma'am." But just a few days later, something happened that changed everything. Did you not know about Emily? My husband revealed something shocking to her. Hearing the truth, my mother-in-law turned pale. "I'm Emily Johnson. 3 years ago, I married Alex, whom I met through a mutual friend. Alex's family runs a diner, which his mom mostly manages. His dad passed away when Alex was young, so his mom raised him on her own. I respected her for that at first. After we got married, Alex wanted me to keep working, so I didn't quit my job. Alex, as the second-generation owner, ran the diner with his mom. But my mother-in-law didn't like that I wasn't helping around the house. A woman who doesn't help with house chores, even if you work, women's salaries aren't worth much, she grumbled daily. Soon, her constant complaints turned into harassment. "You don't do any chores," she'd complain. And when I did manage to do some, she'd say, "You're not doing it properly. Don't you care at all?" Even if I tried my best, it was never good enough for her. She'd call me useless and lecture me for hours, which stressed me out more and more. When I told Alex, he'd just say, "It's between you two, don't drag me into it," and stayed out of it. Then, one day, there was an incident. The diner was closed, and my mother-in-law had gone somewhere in the morning. Later, she called me out of the blue, demanding I come pick her up. The call ended abruptly, and I had no choice but to go to the train station to get her. As soon as I got there, she started complaining about me being late, about the car heater, everything. I just nodded, trying to ignore her. But my silence seemed to annoy her even more. "What kind of attitude is that? Aren't you disrespecting your mother-in-law?" she yelled, and in her anger, she slapped me while I was driving. "Ouch. Please stop. I'm driving," I pleaded, but she ignored me and continued yelling. Then, as she tried to kick me, her foot accidentally hit the steering wheel. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed. Confused, I asked the nurse, who was changing my IV, where I was and what had happened. She told me I'd been in a car accident. I had a broken leg, cuts and bruises all over. "How's my mother-in-law?" I asked. "She only has a few scratches," the nurse replied. That was a relief. But when my mother-in-law came into my room, she immediately started yelling. "This is all your fault. You injured me. You need to pay for it." She showed me a small piece of gauze on her arm, a minor scratch, while I was confined to bed, unable to move. The accident had been her fault. She hit me while I was driving, causing us to crash. But instead of apologizing, she was blaming me. "You're just a nuisance, you know that?" she sneered. "Don't come back if you can't even handle basic housework." At that moment, something inside me snapped. Before I realized it, I replied, "Oh, I'd be delighted to leave, ma'am." My mother-in-law looked shocked. "I won't be returning to your house. I'm divorcing Alex. Thank you for everything." I bowed slightly, pretending to be polite, while my mother-in-law was left speechless. She eventually left, but she kept coming back to complain, saying, "You'll regret this when you're out on the streets." But I ignored her, just sitting on my phone. A week later, while she was ranting as usual, my husband, Alex, suddenly burst into the room, looking pale. "What's going on here?" he asked, holding a divorce paper with my information filled in. "Oh, Dad mailed it to me. I'm glad it got here safely." Surprised, Alex asked, "Why so suddenly?" I explained what his mother had been saying to me. "And did you know, Mom? Emily earns way more than I do." Alex's face turned pale, and his voice shook as he asked this. "Yes, I've been working at a large company since before we got married. I've put in a lot of hard work and achieved good results, so I now hold a pretty high position. My salary is quite good because of how challenging the job is. But she doesn't look like she earns that much." My mother-in-law scoffed. "She always wears the same kinds of clothes." "That's because Emily has been spending her money to help our diner," my husband explained. This was true. The diner, which my mother-in-law managed, was close to going bankrupt. It was struggling when my husband took over because my mother-in-law didn't know much about running a business. My husband was trying to turn things around, and I've been using my salary to keep it going. I also gave advice on how to manage it better. Thanks to this, we avoided the worst, but without my income, the diner would probably fail. There's no way that useless woman could do something like that, my mother-in-law said, looking flustered and unable to believe it. I held up my phone. Here's the financial data for the diner and my latest pay slip. My company issues pay stubs digitally. She stared at the screen, her face growing pale as she looked at the proof. Then I added, "Oh, and I've already consulted the police about the accident you caused." What? She looked completely shocked. Yes, I said with a sigh. Since there was an accident, the police need to investigate. I told them exactly what happened and also handed over the dash cam footage. Why? Why would you do that? My mother-in-law asked, her voice filled with shock. Judging by your reaction, you seem to know that you caused the accident, don't you? I replied. You could face criminal charges, but if you admit it now, the punishment might be lighter. After a while, my mother-in-law started trembling. To my surprise, she dropped to her knees and said, I am sorry. I had no idea we were living off your money. I'm also sorry about the accident. I'll reflect on my actions. Please forgive me. This sudden change was shocking. Until now, she never once apologized. Watching her apologize only to avoid trouble felt pathetic. I didn't feel angry anymore. I was just disgusted. Emily, Mom's really sorry, Alex, my husband, said tearfully, patting her on the back. She looked up at him, teary-eyed, and he nodded to reassure her. Seeing them trying to earn my sympathy, I spoke firmly. What are you saying? I'm not forgiving either of you. Huh? They both looked at me stunned. It's pretty obvious, I continued. Actually, I was planning to divorce you even before this mess with your mom. I was badly injured, yet you didn't bother to visit me once. You spent my money without showing any gratitude. I've been fed up for a long time. What? Alex was completely taken aback. There's no reason for me to stay married to you, I said, smiling calmly while they both looked shocked and desperate. Alex threw a fit, but once I mentioned getting a lawyer involved, he quickly signed the divorce papers. Honestly, he should have just signed without making such a fuss. I couldn't believe I'd been married to him, and I felt a deep regret. Without my financial support, their family diner soon ran into trouble. It shut down not long after, and Alex and my mother-in-law were left in a poor situation. They had to sell the diner for almost nothing and move to a small, run-down apartment. Having no other job experience, they were now facing the hardship my mother-in-law had once warned me about, being left out on the streets. They could only find low-paying jobs, barely making enough to get by. It turned out my mother-in-law had lied about being a widow. She was actually quite a flirt, and her husband had divorced her and left because he'd had enough. Even on the day of our accident, she'd been out with another man. I learned these details from the police officer who was investigating the accident. I'm really grateful to the police for sticking with the investigation. It's likely my mother-in-law will be charged with a crime soon, which would completely ruin her already difficult life. After our divorce, my ex-husband even tried to get back together. But I told him, if you keep bothering me, I'll call the cops on you and your mom. He stayed away after that. The divorce went smoothly, and I cut all ties with my in-laws. My broken bone healed with treatment, and now I'm working hard while still recovering. Before, I was spending almost all my money on keeping their diner afloat, so I had almost nothing left for myself. But now, it's different. I work just for me, and I get to spend money on myself. I didn't realize how much joy that would bring. I'm planning to value myself more now, and if I find a partner who respects me, I might even consider getting remarried someday.